Hi, so this is Professor Brennan. I'm back, and we are talking about communication patterns within the family as a system. And let's take a look at that. Okay, here we are. This is for my interpersonal communication class. This is part 3 of communication and close relationships. So we're going to look at 4 different types of communication patterns within the family. Now, generally speaking, we talk about patterns. Pattern means the general way that families communicate with each other. Okay? So it doesn't mean it always happens that way, but generally speaking, because families are built on this idea that we want to be consistent and we have certain ways of doing things, and so chances are you belong to a family that has one of these patterns, more or less. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So what do we mean by this? The first thing I want you to look at is notice this. Conformity, that means conforming with the will of the family or the will of the parents, depending on what we're talking about here. Conformity means doing what is expected. Okay, conformity oftentimes has to do with expectations and rules, the way you're supposed to behave and act. And then conversation is basically, that's communication, folks, right? How do we talk? Our communication with others. So in what's called consensual family, both high conformity and high conversation or high communication. In a consensual family, let me kind of explain what it is. If your family has, let's just assume that you have 2 parents or caretakers, however that looks. You have 2 people that are in charge and you're the kids, and those 2 parents want to have communication with their children. Okay, they want that. They want the students, they want their children to talk to them and tell them what's going on. They want to talk about decisions, maybe like where they should go on vacation. How do they feel about that? What do they want to do? But ultimately, the parents will decide what's going to happen. Okay, so they involved their children in the communication about certain family things that are going on. But ultimately, high conformity means that expectation also in conformity is often about your roles that you have in the family. So the higher the conformity, the more rigid those rules are, the more certain those boundaries are. So if parents are the parents, they're in charge and they have the final say because they're the leaders of the family, right? They're the way showers, they're the leaders. In high conformity, that is the way it's seen. Okay, so they might have high communication, but ultimately they get to decide on what's going to happen. That's in consensual families. Now let's stay on this high conformity side, because remember, we're talking about high conformity in terms of expectations and behavior. So high conformity in what we call protective families. And the notice that the communication or the conversation, let's call it communication, is low. It means that the parents or the caretakers, the leaders of the family, aren't really interested in what the children have to say or their feelings about the decisions that are being made, because it's more important for the parents to be the leaders and make decisions on the direction in terms of where the family's going, what the family activities are going to be, when the family eats, what they eat. So that when they say protective, right, you might think it is like more authoritative, but oftentimes it's about the parents feel this great sense of like needing to protect and make sure that their families are okay, their children are okay, and their children are protected and safe. So they take on the full responsibility and feeling like they have the responsibility because they're older and they have the knowledge and experience to take care of their kids. And they feel like it's very important that kids conform to those expectations and those roles. Now, what I can say, I'm going to look at this in terms of ethnically. Oftentimes in Mexican American families and Mexican families, they often fall under the protective end because the traditional role of mother and father in Mexican families is very strong. And oftentimes the male is the patriarch making all the decisions in the family. And the importance of having the children be, and I'm talking about traditional, doesn't mean it's happening in your family if you're Mexican American, but the children are often, just there to be like to help them grow, but in terms of what they have to say or what their opinions are is not important. It's more important for whoever's in charge to make the decisions to protect them. Okay, so they're thinking about it not so much as control, and it may appear as control as you if you're a kid, but it's really about taking care of you. Okay, got all that. Let's go on the other end, the low end of conformity. So on the low end of conformity, we have pluralistic and laissez-faire. I'm going to start with laissez-faire. This is the easiest one to talk about. Laissez-faire is like a hands-off approach. So this is the typical latchkey, like the parents don't really talk to the kids. They've got kids, kids come and go, they do whatever they want. Parents come and go and do whatever they want. There's not a lot of rules. There isn't a lot of watching over. There's definitely doesn't feel protective at all. So the parents and the kids aren't really talking to each other, and there isn't any strong conformity in terms of who's in charge. Now, laissez-faire can work in certain situations, but oftentimes, and it might work when the kids are older, but when the kids are younger, not so much. That can be really bad because children need direction. Okay, so, but that's laissez-faire, is a latchkey. And there could be a lot of reasons why it's laissez-faire. It could be that there's drug addiction in the family. There could be because there's domestic violence, right? And maybe mom has fled with the kids and she has to work like 3 jobs to keep the family going. And so the kids are kind of left on their own. And she has to kind of treat those little kids like they're little adults because she's all by herself. Okay, so laissez-faire doesn't necessarily mean bad, but if you're looking for structure, this is the least structure form of communication style in the family. Now, pluralistic means lots of talk and agreement is not important. So there isn't this important in terms of roles and conformity to roles. Okay, if you're the daughter or the son, you can have disagreement with your parents, and that's okay. And maybe even your opinions are part of the solution, part of this problem-solving experience. Okay, so you're not like it's not like you have to. The parents are making the final decisions. Usually in pluralistic, in some ways even be more democratic, but it's definitely less on the conformity and less on the rules. So there might be less structure. So you might have this feeling like you're all in this together, but wanting to talk about it is really important. So I hope I've established for you the differences between these because they are really specifically different. It can help you then to also look at this particular graph right here. Okay, moving on. Friendship and communication. We're going to look at that briefly. So types of friendships. We've got friendships that we've had our whole lives, and we have friendships that we've just made, right? Long-term versus short-term. We have friendships like, if you've heard the saying, friendships for a reason, friendships for a season, friendships for a lifetime, right? Or relationships. Some friendships it's a youthful type of friendship. We just have fun with that. It could be a friendship that's more mature, where you're more serious and you talk about serious things. We have friendships that are, it's about that relationship. And then we have friendships that are about the task. right? Often friendships that are task-oriented could be like, for me, I have friends that are colleagues, but often what we end up talking about, in addition to our own personal lives, but our real connection is the work that we do as teachers. So they're more task-oriented. There's nothing less about that friendship though. They still remain important women and men in my life, but they happen to be more task-oriented as we focus on our communication is around professional conversations. Okay. High disclosure versus low disclosure. You can have friendships where you don't talk about anything significant, but you just like to hang out, right? Maybe that's what you need in your life right now. It's have a superficial level and you all just hang out. But then sometimes you need a friend where you can like bare your heart to, bare your soul to. Friendship with high obligation, low obligation. So low obligation means, hey, come on over if you feel like it, hang when you want. Let's get together whenever, it's low obligation, no pressure. High obligation is this kind of friendship where you feel like you've got to take care of each other, right? Maybe something's going on. Maybe you have a project that you're doing together. Or you have a business you want to make. So there's a certain sense of obligation to each other in terms of taking care. Or maybe you feel a high obligation toward this friend because they've been in a car accident and they need your help. There's all kinds of ways that we can think of high obligation. Could be emotional obligation. Friendships that you have occasional contact with, friendships that you have contact with every day, several times a day. Okay, so let's just, before I go. So friendships, types of friendship, youthful just means like the nature of that friendship. It could be something that started in youth, and it could be friendships that started when you were older, right? Long terms versus short term. None of these are good or bad. They're just ways of looking at friendship. So we're not putting any value on this. You might value certain things over other things, but if you think of people coming in your life that become your friends, there's probably people that have come in your life that were your friends. It might be out of your life now, but they had an important purpose for being there. I think that there's no mistake why we meet people. That's just my belief in that. Not that I say that we're preordained or anything, but I just think that there aren't any mistakes around that. And that when we meet people and, we have gifts to give to each other, whatever that looks like, even a gift that might hurt us. So oftentimes those things that hurt us end up teaching us some lessons. All right. Sex and gender and friendship. We're going to be completing with this slide. So these are different types of friendships, same-sex relationships, or same-sex friendships, excuse me. Cross-sex relationships means men and women, right? Opposite sex. Same-sex women and women, men and men. We're talking about friendships meaning platonic relationships. And then we have this thing called friends with benefits. This is highly controversial and everybody has an opinion about this, right? What do you think? Do you think friends with benefits really works? What happens? There's common things that are said about what happens, right? Someone starts to get more emotionally involved than someone else. Are friends with benefits actually even a possibility? Can you really have sex or some kind of sexual interaction with someone that you just want to stay friends with? Can you remain platonic? Is it possible even to do that? Is it something that's just personal driven? I know I've had students that say that they're pansexual, and they are, in fact, I can think of a student right now that she's married, and she and her husband are pansexual, and they have more than one partner. That is the agreement that they have. So there's a whole bunch of varieties of way you can, obviously that's a relationship, not a friendship, but does that work? What do you think? Here's a clip, and I'm going to leave you this. We're not going to watch the clip. This is a really fun clip to watch. If you ever watch Seinfeld, it's a conversation that Jerry and Elaine have about after they've had their friends with benefits, whether they want to continue that or not. Okay, we're going to stop right there.